Right now, somewhere in your body, something is trying to kill you. A bacterium, a fungus, a virus riding in on the air you just breathed. Your immune system is already moving, already fighting, and you will never even notice. But here is the question that almost nobody thinks to ask. Before antibiotics, before antiseptic, before any medicine at all, how did people survive? Not just survive, thrive, build civilizations, cross oceans, fight wars, raise children, live entire long lives without a single dose of penicillin, without sterile bandages, without a pharmacy on the corner? The answer is not what you think it is. And once you understand it, you will never look at your own body the same way again. For most of human history, getting a cut was a gamble with your life. A scratch from a thorn, a bite from an animal, a wound taken in battle. Any of these could spiral into a systemic infection and kill you within days. No one knew why. Germs were invisible. The concept of bacteria would not be articulated until Louis Pasteur began his fermentation experiments in the 1850s. Before that, people had theories: bad air, imbalanced humors, divine punishment, curse. They were wrong about the cause, but they were not always wrong about the cure. This is the part that surprises people. Ancient humans did not simply sit and die. They observed. They experimented. They passed down knowledge for thousands of years through oral tradition, through practice, through trial, and devastating error. And some of what they discovered actually worked. The oldest known surgical text is the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an Egyptian document dating to roughly 1600 BCE. But the content it records is almost certainly older, far older. In it, ancient Egyptian physicians described treating infected wounds with honey, not because they understood bacteria, but because they noticed that wounds treated with honey closed faster, festered less, and killed the patient less often. They did not know why. They just knew it worked. Modern microbiology eventually explained it. Honey is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture away from the wound site and creates an environment where bacteria cannot survive. It also produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide as it interacts with moisture. Some varietals, particularly Manuka honey, have additional antimicrobial compounds that directly disrupt bacterial cell membranes. A 2011 study published in the journal Microbiology by researchers at Cardiff University confirmed that Manuka honey could kill some antibiotic-resistant bacteria in laboratory conditions. The Egyptians found this 4,000 years earlier with their eyes alone. But honey was not the only tool your ancestors had. Across ancient cultures on nearly every continent, one plant appeared again and again in wound treatments. Allium sativum. You call it garlic. Ancient Egyptians fed it to pyramid laborers to keep them healthy and strong. Roman soldiers carried it into battle as both food and medicine. In ancient India, the Karaka Samhita, one of the foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine compiled around 400 BCE, recommended garlic preparations for treating wounds and fevers. Ancient Chinese physicians used it. Ancient Greeks used it. Even the earliest recorded recipes in Mesopotamia include garlic as a healing agent. For a long time, historians categorized this as folk belief, the same kind of superstition as bloodletting or incantation. Then a researcher at the University of Copenhagen named Casper Dierlund Wijkman began examining the allicin compound that garlic releases when crushed. Allicin is the molecule garlic produces as a natural defense against pathogens in the soil. When you crush or chew a garlic clove, you activate an enzyme reaction that generates allicin in seconds. And allicin is genuinely antimicrobial. It disrupts the sulfur-containing proteins that bacteria need to reproduce. In laboratory trials, it has shown activity against strains including Staphylococcus aureus, Helicobacter pylori, and even some forms of E. coli. Your ancestors did not know about sulfur bonds or bacterial metabolism, but they knew that garlic-treated wounds healed differently. And they were right. Now here is where it gets stranger and more uncomfortable. Some of the most effective infection-fighting tools your ancestors used were not plants at all. They were things modern people would find genuinely repulsive. Maggots, for example. Ancient Mayan healers used maggot therapy on wounds. Aboriginal Australians in certain regions did too. And so, recorded in field dispatches from the American Civil War, did military surgeons who noticed that soldiers whose wounds had been colonized by fly larvae before treatment actually fared better than those whose wounds had not. It seemed insane. It seemed horrifying. But it kept happening. The explanation came much later. Maggots, specifically the larvae of Lucilla sericata, the common green bottlefly, feed exclusively on dead tissue. They do not touch living cells. While consuming necrotic flesh, they also secrete compounds including allantoin and ammonia that actively inhibit bacterial growth and stimulate wound healing. By the 1930s, a physician named William Baer at Johns Hopkins Hospital had formalized maggot debridement therapy. Today, it is FDA cleared. Hospitals use it on diabetic ulcers and infected wounds when standard antibiotics fail. What your ancestors stumbled into by watching nature, modern medicine eventually had to rediscover. But the most profound thing your ancient ancestors had was not a treatment at all. It was a body. Your immune system is not a product of modern civilization. It is millions of years old. It is arguably the most sophisticated biological system that evolution has ever produced, and your ancestors lived under conditions that, in a brutal and unforgiving way, made it extraordinarily good. Consider what immunologists call the hygiene hypothesis, first articulated by epidemiologist David Strachan in a landmark 1989 paper published in the British Medical Journal. Strachan was studying hay fever and allergies in British children and noticed something counterintuitive. Children raised in larger households with more siblings had significantly lower rates of allergic disease. The more exposure to infection and environmental microorganisms early in life, the more robust the immune calibration in adulthood. He proposed that early microbial exposure was not a danger. It was training. Your ancient ancestors were bathed in microbial exposure from birth. Dirt floors, animal contact, unfiltered water, unwashed hands, communal living with dozens of other humans and their bacteria, foods fermented out of necessity rather than preference, breast milk for years. All of this was immunological education. The immune system learned, through constant low-level exposure, to distinguish threats from noise, to calibrate its responses, to not overreact, to not underreact. That education has a cost in the short term. Some children died from infections their bodies could not yet handle. This is not a romanticized history. The child mortality rates of the ancient world were catastrophic by any modern measure. But the survivors emerged with immune systems forged in a crucible that modern, sanitary, antibiotic-medicated environments simply cannot replicate. There is also the matter of what your ancestors ate, or more precisely, what they did not eat. Hunter-gatherer diets were diverse in ways that are almost impossible to overstate. Hundreds of different plant species across a single seasonal cycle. Wild game with fat profiles entirely different from domesticated animals. Roots, tubers, berries, bark, seeds, insects, fungi, larvae. Each of these carried distinct microbial passengers that seeded and diversified the gut microbiome in ways that had cascading effects on immune function. A landmark 2015 study by anthropologist Tim Spector at King's College London compared the gut microbiome of modern Westerners with that of the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania. The Hadza microbiome was not just different, it was vastly more diverse. And immune function in hunter-gatherer populations tracked with that diversity in measurable ways. Your gut is not just where you digest food, it is where approximately 70% of your immune system lives. The bacteria down there are not passengers. They are participants. They train your immune cells. They produce compounds that regulate inflammation. They crowd out pathogenic species before they can establish a foothold. And for most of human history, the human gut was a rich, diverse, thriving ecosystem because the human diet was rich and diverse and wild. The modern gut is, by comparison, a quiet, simplified, impoverished version of what your ancestors carried. There is one more thing your ancient ancestors had that modern medicine is only beginning to take seriously: community. When someone fell ill in a hunter-gatherer band, the entire group responded. Food was brought. The sick person was moved away from the cold and closer to fire. Physical contact, touch, was maintained. This was not just social warmth. Research from psychoneuroimmunology The field that studies the connection between psychological state and immune function consistently shows that social connection measurably enhances immune response. A 2015 meta-analysis by researchers at Brigham Young University found that social isolation increased the risk of early death by roughly 26%, a figure comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness suppresses immune gene expression. Belonging activates it. Your ancient ancestors did not die alone. They did not fall ill in isolated apartments and stare at screens. When the body was fighting, the community fought with it, and the immune system noticed. None of this is to say the ancient world was better. It was not. Infections killed millions. Childbirth killed millions more. A splinter could end a life in ways that are now completely preventable with a basic antibiotic course. The development of germ theory, antiseptic technique, penicillin, vaccines, and modern medicine represents one of the most profound improvements in human welfare in all of recorded history. But there is a quieter truth sitting underneath all of that progress. A truth that has implications for the body you are living in right now. Your ancestors survived not because they were lucky, and not because the infections they faced were weaker. They survived because they had built systems across hundreds of thousands of years of biological and cultural evolution that were shockingly well-suited to the microbial world they lived inside. A diverse gut, a hardened immune system, a community that responded to illness as a collective threat, plants that contained real antimicrobial chemistry, observations accumulated over millennia and passed down in the form of practice, recipe, and ritual. And your body, right now, is still running that ancient software. The immune system fighting whatever is in your bloodstream tonight is not a modern invention. It is ancient. It was shaped by the Pleistocene, calibrated by the Savannah, hardened by 10,000 generations of exposure and survival. Every time it wins, and it wins far more often than you ever notice, it is running a program that was written long before anyone had a word for bacteria. You carry all of that with you. Every cell, every antibody, every memory the immune system stores against the last thing it defeated. Right now, somewhere in your body, something is trying to kill you, and your ancient body already knows exactly what to do.